Warning: the following story contains descriptions of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. The average serial killer starts their killing sprees during the ages of between 25 and 33. Here are 3 serial killers who were very young when they started their sprees. Number 1. Jesse Pomeroy. Jesse Harding Pomeroy was born in Charleston, Massachusetts on November 29, 1859, to Thomas J. Pomeroy and Ruth Ann Snowman. He was the second of 2 children. His brother Charles Jefferson Pomeroy was 2 years older. Thomas J. Pomeroy was a veteran of the U.S. Civil War. From 1871 to 1872, there were reports that several young boys were individually enticed to remote areas and attacked by a slightly older boy. However, no one was ever arrested. The attacks were noteworthy because of the extreme amount of brutality used by the assailant. The young boys were beaten with a fist and a belt, and in at least 2 of the attacks, a knife. Some of the boys were physically scarred permanently. In 1872, Ruth and the 2 children moved back to South Boston. Pomeroy's attacks on young boys continued, and he was finally arrested, and his case heard in front of a juvenile court judge. Pomeroy was found guilty and sentenced to the State Reform School for Boys at Westborough, Massachusetts, for his minority. The Boston Globe covered the story. The last line of the article: "It is generally concluded that the boy is mentally deficient." In February 1874, at the age of 14, Pomeroy was paroled back to his mother and brother in South Boston. His mother ran her own dressmaking shop, and his brother Charles sold newspapers. In March 1874, a 10-year-old girl from South Boston named Katie Curran went missing. On April 22, 1874, the mutilated body of 4-year-old Horace Millen was found on the marsh of Dorchester Bay. Immediately, the police detectives sought out Pomeroy. Despite lacking evidence implicating him in the crime, the body of Katie Curran was found later in the basement of Pomeroy's mother's dress shop. Her remains were hastily and carelessly concealed in an ash heap. Pomeroy was taken to view Millen's body and asked if he committed the murder. At the coroner's inquest, Pomeroy was denied the right to counsel. The case of Commonwealth v. Jesse Pomeroy was heard in the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, Suffolk County, Boston, on December 9th and December 10th, 1874. At the trial, the Attorney General argued for a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree. In his closing arguments, he urged an alternative charge for murder with an extreme atrocity, which according to Massachusetts law is first-degree murder, but differs from the original charge on the requirement of premeditation. Pomeroy was pronounced guilty on December 10, 1874, with the jury's recommendation of mercy on account of the prisoner's youth. Pomeroy's attorney, Charles Robinson, filed 2 exceptions which were overruled in February 1875, at which point Pomeroy was sentenced to death by hanging. It remained for the governor to sign the death warrant and assign a date for Pomeroy's execution. However, Governor William Gaston refused to comply with his executive responsibility. The only legal means of sparing Pomeroy's life was through the Massachusetts Governor's Council, and only if a sample majority of the 9-member council voted to commute the death penalty. Over the next year and a half, the council voted 3 times. The first 2 votes upheld Pomeroy's execution, and both times Governor Gaston refused to sign the death warrant. In August 1876, the council took a 3rd vote, anonymously, and Pomeroy's sentence was commuted to life in prison in solitary confinement. On the evening of September 7, 1876, Pomeroy was transferred from the Suffolk County Jail to the state prison in Charlestown and began his life in solitary. He was 16 years and 9 months old. Pomeroy remained incarcerated at the Charlestown State Prison. In prison, Pomeroy claimed that he taught himself to read several foreign languages, including Hebrew, and one visiting psychiatrist found that he had learned German with considerable accuracy. He wrote poetry and argued with prison officials over his right to have it published, and he studied law books and spent decades composing legal challenges to his conviction and requests for a pardon. A psychiatric report on Pomeroy made in 1914 and quoted extensively in the Boston Globe after his death noted that Pomeroy had made 10 or 12 determined attempts to escape and that handmade tools were frequently found in his possession. The prison warden reported finding rope, steel pins, and a drill that Pomeroy had concealed in his cell or on his person. According to the Globe, Pomeroy lost an eye after attempting to destroy the side of his cell by redirecting a gas pipe. The 1914 psychiatric report claimed that Pomeroy had shown the greatest ingenuity and a persistence which is unprecedented in the history of the prison. In 1917, with the support of District Attorney Joseph Peltier, Pomeroy's sentence was commuted to the extent of allowing him the privilege afforded to other life prisoners. At first he resisted, wanting nothing less than a pardon. He eventually adjusted to his changed circumstances and appeared in a minstrel show at the prison. In 1929, by this time an elderly man in frail health, he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane, where he died on September 29, 1932. Number 2. Craig Price. Craig Chandler Price, born October 11, 1973, is a juvenile serial killer from Button Woods neighborhoods of Warwick, Rhode Island. At a minor age of 13, in 1987, Craig Price murdered neighbor Rebecca Spencer, a 27-year-old mother of two, by stabbing her 58 times. 2 years later, in 1989, Craig Price butchered another neighbor, Joan Heaton, with 63 times, and two of her young daughters using kitchen knives. In a nonchalant, matter-of-fact drawl, he described the night of terror in the Heaton home. He told how he bit Heaton's face as he knifed her. He mimicked the last sounds of the dying girls. Craig Price was sentenced 29 years to the jail during various sentences from 1991 to 2007. He will be sealed in the jail until at least 2020. At the time, he will be 46 years old. Price calmly confessed to his crimes after he was discovered. He was arrested a month before his 16th birthday and was tried and convicted as a minor. By law, this meant that he would be released and his criminal record sealed when he turned 21. And Price bragged that he would make history when he was released. The case led to changes in state law to allow juveniles to be tried as adults for serious crimes, but these cannot be applied retroactively to Price. Rhode Island residents formed a group, Citizens Opposed to the Release of Craig Price, to lobby for his continued imprisonment. Due to the brutality of his crimes and the opinion of state psychologists that he was a poor candidate for rehabilitation. However, Price was not released due to a series of crimes he committed behind bars while he was held in the Rhode Island Training School. During his incarceration, Price had been charged with additional crimes, including criminal contempt for refusing a psychological evaluation, extortion for threatening a corrections officer, assault, and violation of probation for fights while in prison. He was sentenced to an additional 10 to 25 years, depending on his cooperation with treatment. Craig Price is the youngest serial killer in U.S. history. And as far as for the motive, Price himself claimed racism by white people beginning when he was just a young child was a factor in that he was the first time he wanted someone to die, as when a group of white adults allegedly shouted racial slurs at him and tried to run him over with their car when he was just a young boy. An officer from the Rhode Island Department of Corrections said Price has been booked twice for fighting since leaving the adult correctional institutions in Cranston. Price was denied parole in March 2009, and his release date was set for May 2020. In 2004, he was transferred from Rhode Island to Florida to serve his time due to his violent tendencies. In Florida, on July 29, 2009, Craig was involved in a prison fight with another inmate. While trying to break up the fight, one of the corrections officers was stabbed in the finger by a handmade shiv in Price's possession. In the wake of the prison fight, Price was transferred to another facility. On April 4, 2017, Price was accused of stabbing fellow inmate Joshua Davis at the Shawnee Correctional Institution in Living Oak, Florida, with a 5-inch homemade knife. On January 18, 2019, he was sentenced to 25 years for the crime. Craig Price is currently imprisoned at the Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida. Number 3. David BROM. David Francis BROM was born on October 3rd, 1971, is an American mass murderer. He killed his parents, brother, and sister with an axe in February 1988 in Rochester, Minnesota, after an argument with his father earlier in the evening. In the early evening of February 18, 1988, Olmsted County Sheriff's deputies discovered the bodies of Bernard, age 43, Paulette, age 42, Diane, age 13, and Richard, age 11, BROM in the BROM family home. Missing from the home were the two oldest sons, David, age 16, and Joe, age 18. The police had been notified by the administration of David's school that students had reported hearing a rumor that David had informed another student that he had killed his family that morning. All individuals had sustained numerous gashes in the head and upper body. Police subsequently found a blood-stained axe in the basement that forensic tests indicated was used to kill all 4 victims. Immediately after the discovery, the police were concerned that David might be the victim of an abduction, but a friend of David's informed the police that David himself told her that he killed his family and testified to the discussion in the subsequent trial. She told jurors at the trial that BROM stopped her on the morning of February 18, 1988, as she was going to school, and convinced her to skip school with him. He then detailed how he killed his parents, brother, and sister. Quote, he said he hit his dad with an axe. He kept hitting his dad, and his dad kept getting up. Unquote. The girl said BROM told her he had gotten to an argument with his father about 11:30 p.m. the previous night, and that he stayed up until about 3 a.m. She indicated that BROM detailed the crime, saying that he went to his parents' room, first killing his father. Then he hit his mother and went to his brother's room. Then he saw his sister standing over their mother in the upstairs hallway, at which point he attacked them both. BROM was captured on February 19, 1988, while using a payphone near the local post office. His case was initially referred to the juvenile court system because his age at the time of the crimes was 16, but was eventually sent to the adult judicial system based on the severity of the crime. As BROM's defense claim was insanity, mental illness was a factor in the trial, and much media and legal focus was placed on Minnesota's use of the McNaughton rules in determining if BROM was legally insane at the time of the crime. On October 16, 1989, BROM was convicted of first-degree murder and was given 3 consecutive life sentences, with 52 years and 6 months before he had a possibility for parole. David BROM is currently housed at the Minnesota State Correctional Facility in Stillwater, Minnesota. For more content, like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.